Recording in progress, Dean. How are you?
I'm great. How are you?
I'm all right. I'm dealing with trying to check in on people that are on the West Coast. As you know, there is a wildfire that is in Los Angeles that is kind of burning out of control. So I was kind of sending out text messages to a bunch of people that I know that we know a couple of them as well mutually. Um, Before we get started, I want to address the elephant in the room. Um, Behind me, you will see a toilet. And back here, there is a sink. To This office is the weirdest office in the world. It is a office slash bathroom. I have my son right here. I have bookshelves, different action figures all around and stuff. Sadie's got a desk over here, but this isn't an office in
I
any
love it.
way.
It's the best kind of office because it has a toilet. In fact,
Yeah, oh my goodness. Yeah, totally. Like there have been times where I've been like not doing a video podcast, but doing an audio where I've gotten up and I've literally had to pee or something like that. So
but the older we get, the more we should just be sitting on toilets only.
it's true.
You know what I
It's true.
mean?
It's
I
true.
mean, and actually, to respond to what you were saying about the apocalyptic fires that are happening in
Yeah.
California right now, I too was texting because we all know people in California. I
Right.
mean, I was texting Jonathan Ames. He had to evacuate. My
Oh,
friend Sam Catlin, who was the showrunner on Preacher, and he was one of the writers, directors, and producers of Breaking Bad, who was my busboy when I was a waiter back in the day.
wow.
Uh, I was texting him. I was texting a friend of mine whose house burnt to the ground. Burnt to the
Oh,
ground. I saw pictures of it. It's so messed up. I was texting back and forth with Moby, who's staying put. And he was sending me pictures of his skyline, which was
yeah.
crazy, you know? So, yeah, no, I had about 10 or 15 people. And then I realized there are like hundreds more of our friends, you
Yeah.
know?
I think it comes down to who I can contact easily.
Right,
That has nothing to do with Facebook or anything like that. But like Ray Anthony Height, comic book artist, Caleb
yep,
Monroe, comic book writer, Bill Murphy, who made the Stray action figure and was going to make a Red Hook action figure.
right,
He also makes toys. He lives in LA, and a lot of them
right,
are in various stages. Like Caleb was the only one um, that he said that he evacuated to San Diego, and they're staying until everything's done. But everybody else is like, we're kind of outside of it. We're okay right now. So, you
right,
know,
right.
if it comes up on your feed and you're available, like to you have the means to donate to the Red Cross or anything, I think both of us agree that, helping in any way you can, especially if you're on the opposite coast that is like freezing, like we can't imagine losing our houses right now. So,
Oh,
uh,
hell no. And it's funny because like the other kind of elephant in the social media room is that a lot of people have been talking about leaving Facebook and
right.
Instagram, and yet right now it's these platforms that everyone's using to communicate because
Yeah.
when your phone goes down, somehow you still can get on Facebook or whatever the hell,
Right.
you know?
Right.
And
Yeah.
so there is a purpose. There is a, I don't know. I mean, how do you feel? Like I feel like I don't think I'm leaving Facebook.
I want to. Um, as I mentioned on Facebook a couple of days ago, saying that I will go back to Friendster in a heartbeat.
Oh
But
yeah.
um, but the thing about it is, um, it's kind of like that thing of where you have an artist, let's say an actor like Kevin Spacey. He did a movie called Baby Driver, and around the same time, it came out that he took advantage of his position as a senior actor, as a producer, as a director, whatever it was, and took advantage of young actors like Anthony Rapp from Rent and a couple of other actors, and he was in the parlance canceled. Same with Harvey Weinstein, same with a bunch of other ones, Louis C.K., etc. And the thing about it is, there's always this discussion: can you separate the art from the artist?
Right.
Woody Allen's another good example of that. And I personally enjoy Baby Driver a lot. Um, it's problematic on two levels. One being Kevin Spacey, the other one being Ansel Elgort, the lead actor. who was very inappropriate with female co-stars on another movie.
Mm,
So the thing becomes, do you know, can I watch that and enjoy it for what it is, or do I have to watch it with a grain of really terrible salt in my mouth?
right.
And how long can I stand it before I take it off? I can't say that I can separate one from the other. Someone once said, if you like, the the one way to look at it is you can watch it up until the point where you can't enjoy it anymore. In
Mm,
other words, like Michael Jackson.
mm,
Up until bad, I'm okay with Michael Jackson. It's when we start getting into the dangerous
mm.
era and like post
Interesting.
bad stuff. You're like, that's when you start finding out about like all the improprieties, and you're like, and then like it colors your enjoyment of the work anyway. And you're like, I'm less likely to listen to this album because of what I know about him. And I find that that goes, that goes well sometimes, but other times it's like I can't police everything.
No,
That's just me. I can police myself, and if I can police myself and I can read a work or watch a film or listen to a song and still enjoy it despite the horrible person that made it, I don't think that makes me horrible. I don't think that makes me participating in that person's, not participating in their art because I am, but participating in their personal life, like the parasocial relationship thing that came up a lot during John Mulaney going into rehab. I remember people were like, "Oh, people don't know how to feel because John Mulaney this, and it's a parasocial relationship." And I find that it's hard to. The hardest part about all of it is justifying it to other people like you, to other
hmm
like your peers or whatever, because some people
hmm
are lenient, some people are absolutely, strict about how they will
hmm
not, I don't know if boycott's the word, but they won't um endorse that person anymore. And I find myself falling somewhere in the middle, to my own fault, maybe, to my credit, maybe. I don't know. Um, where do you fall on that?
I well, first of all, I wish we didn't know so much about the actors and directors and the creators of the works that I enjoy. We
Yeah,
almost know way too much about. That's become like ridiculous, right? Like I just want to enjoy the thing as the piece of art, right? And if I
right.
could never know about an actor, director, singer, whatever, but this is the other thing I do know. I am a creator and I am complicated and I have faults.
Mhm.
So I assume the people I enjoy are also complicated and have faults. Now, I don't mean down to like being cretinous, like to the point of like rape or,
Yeah,
uh, unjustified murder, let's call it, or something like that. Then you're like, it might color the works that you enjoy in some way. But I've been pretty good at being able to separate the person from the work, even
yeah.
though a lot of the work I enjoy is very personal sometimes, you know?
Yeah, I think that's something that we as creators try to achieve as well. We try to put as much of ourselves into our work without, I don't want to say without revealing everything, but while keeping the mystery of who the person making it stays intact.
Right,
Um, it's only for a lack of, I don't know, one or two like uh, boasting boisterous people that would expose us for some impropriety we did by chance,
right,
or like a word we said, or a name we called somebody when we were 13 years old, and
right,
suddenly, you know what I
right.
mean, like it's a thing now. um
But you know what's funny? It's like I'm not going to get too into it because again,
Mhm.
we do have people who police all day long and would love to their job, their self-imposed job is to throw people under the bus. In
Right.
fact, I'd like to discuss Ed Piscorn a little shortly because of something that was published today on the Comics Beat.
Oh,
Um, but like I was hanging out with some friends in Florida, and we were talking all kinds of shit. You know what I'm saying? But we weren't out in public. We were in our friend's living room talking shit. And I think that's okay. But
Yeah.
the adult, the way you know you're a mature adult is to know when you can talk shit. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
Like, I
absolutely.
don't think it stops. I don't think I suddenly am like, you know what? I'm a very perfect person right now. I would never say anything wrong. I say wrong shit all day long, you know?
Yeah. I got
I
caught
can't help
on
myself.
the funny thing is the internet's a very good not a memory bank or something like that, but the internet will be quick to point out when you're being shitty.
Yeah.
I once quoted um, something someone said um, at Jim Hanley's Universe when I worked there about an editor, and I quoted it online, and that was my first mistake
Oh
because
boy.
it wasn't even my words,
Right.
but I quoted it, and it's a very prominent editor, and I don't know that we've made amends since, but we've been friendly since, but there was a point where we were like there was animosity on his side towards me,
Yeah.
and I didn't have it was again, it wasn't my thought. So
Right.
I didn't have any animosity, but I
Right.
definitely, kept my distance just because I'm like, I was in the wrong. I know I was in the wrong. So I just like, like that's fine. Like I realize I'm not working with him, at any point in
Sure.
the near future or
Sure.
whatever.
I
And
think
that's
we've all
fine
made mistakes.
because the thing that it bothered me most is I considered that person an acquaintance, if not a friend. And so I felt like I hurt that person. I definitely deserve the punishment there.
Right. No, I get it. And I think we've all made mistakes that like wouldn't have as the kind of repercussions the social media or the quote the internet can punish us with
Mhm.
is to constantly remind us of an indiscretion a long time ago. I mean, in a weird way, like look at James Gunn, right?
Yeah.
Like if
Yeah.
you knew James Gunn before the James Gunn today, which is basically the same James Gunn, he's just more
Mhm.
successful at what he is. That guy did all kinds of like parodies of porn and you know
Right.
all kinds of stuff that kind of in a way got people to pay attention to him. Okay. And I remember going to see a rough cut of the movie Super, and I gave notes to Ted
Mhm.
Hope, who was the producer on
Yeah.
James Gunn's Super, which
I
to me was
remember
like a
when,
cross between Taxi Driver and Eight Ball, like Travis Bickle and Dan Clowes, in some
yeah,
way. But he always had that kind of sense of humor. And then he kind of got busted for it when some people uncovered some tweets that were
it was,
untoward.
it was it was a costume that he wore at a Halloween party. Um, I think he was a priest and his date was a Catholic schoolgirl. And the implication was,
Right,
and again, it wasn't even explicitly stated to be that, but people just take it, a little bit further,
right,
and like extrapolate the inference that's not even being implied. Do you know what
right,
I mean? Like they
right,
just
right.
made up
Or
something.
if it was being implied, whatever. Okay, that's
Yeah,
your sense of humor. That's your joke. Like, I'm not going to try and stop you from working.
right.
Okay. And I mean, that is the one thing I do miss, I think, is when people who have done bad things are creators or truth tellers, when their mouths are shut, when they're resigned to the cancel jail, and even though they've done bad things, I mean, isn't that what kind of what's the Alan Moore, Brian Boland, The Killing Joke?
Mhm.
Isn't part of the premise of The Killing Joke is that the Joker had one bad day,
Yeah.
and in having one bad day, he derailed, forever, like he can't go back and fix that one bad day he had to the
Mhm.
point where I think Batman even tries to reach his hand out at some point, and
And
Joker can't take it. He can't.
the other thing too is that the Joker's trying to get Batman to have his one bad day.
Right.
So let's get
So he can
Batman
understand the
right,
Joker. Right.
right. And
And so
I think that gets lost a lot. I think it's like a lot of people will it's weird how many people will praise Deadpool, especially like at conventions. You'll always see somebody dressed as Deadpool and they're acting like Deadpool, but in a setting that's not a comic book, it's not appropriate. Like I
right.
saw like a Deadpool cosplayer once walking behind two kids. Uh, both were little girls, I would say about 9, and they weren't dressed in anything or anything, but he's walking behind them with a gun pointed at their heads, going like, shh, and
Yeah,
it's like, those are
yeah,
kids, man. Like doing it to an adult's a totally different thing because they have agency, but a kid doesn't have as much agency, if at all. And
right,
you can't make me part of your joke. It's not
right,
funny.
right. No, I agree. That's. I mean, I'm not gonna like punch the guy out or nothing, but I might be like, come on, you
Yeah,
know, have a little common sense. And I think
right, right.
one of the things that we've lost in social media is common sense.
Well,
Is a
because
certain sense
everything's
of
a reaction.
decency. Yeah,
There's
yeah,
no thinking to anything. It's just all reactive,
right.
especially on Twitter. Twitter, I quit Twitter late last year. I'd say probably around the election, probably.
Mm,
And I haven't gone back. I haven't, I mean,
right,
I'll see screenshots of tweets on Reddit or something like that or Facebook or whatever, but I haven't gone back. And it's because it really does become, I'm going to say something, and I'm either saying it for the sake of your reaction, or you're going to react anyway. And you're going
hmm
to say something vile and uh, terrible about me because of that's your reaction.
right,
And like there's a certain point where you're like, I don't need to participate in this anymore.
right, right.
That's where I
They,
got.
they should just start another social media platform called Your Mom. So every time someone reacts, they just say your mom, like your mom. Like that's what it kind of comes down to in some
Yeah.
ways.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's ridiculous. And to speak to, so Heidi McDonald sent out a survey few weeks ago, whatever. Every year, the Comics Beat publishes like a year in review from creators and publishers and editors and
Mhm.
everybody. And every time I get that, that survey invite, I always go, "What? I don't even what happened last year."
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
I'm trying to think of like what could I possibly say that'd be interesting. And I always pretty much ignore it until the last minute. And then in the last minute, it just prompts me to go, "Okay, just say something," right?
Right.
So I wrote a couple of things that was in the normal survey, the three-part thing that she
Mhm.
published. And then there was like a person of the year question. And I was like, who's the person of the year? And I thought, and I hate that question too, but I was like, for me, it was Ed Piskor,
Mhm.
warts and all, right? And it wasn't, I talked to Ed for about 42 minutes, a day and a half before he killed himself.
I
Okay, so I was
remember.
on the phone with this guy. I called him up. I called up Jim Rugg first to see how he was doing because Jim had basically publicly, professionally separated himself from
Right.
Ed, right? And I understood that for at least that the time being,
Mhm.
because they did cartoonist kayfabe together, which was popular, and like people were wondering what's going to happen to that, what's going to happen to this, like what's going on, and
Yeah.
everyone's jumping to conclusions, and like it wasn't even a week before an allegation or accusation turned into a suicide,
Right.
right?
It was super quick. I mean, it's hard to really put in because we're so far removed from it. It's hard to put into words how fast that like reaction happened. Like
Right.
it was so fast. It was
Right.
so fast.
And I was talking to him, and I was just like, the only red flag I got was that he was in a hotel out of Pennsylvania, right?
Mhm.
Which made me think, well, why? And I wrote about it in this paragraph that I offered, that's on the Comics Beat right now, and she put it in the in memoriam section, about him. And besides talking about Ed, which I won't really get into here, but the bigger takeaway is how we behave because we're talking about being canceled or like being policed or accusations. And it's just like everybody's got to give it a minute. They
Yeah.
don't even give it a minute. And no one is, not no one, but a lot of people don't care about context. They don't care about redemption or second chances or whatever. They just
Mhm.
want a black and white world where you're bad. And it's just like it's going back to Golden Age comics.
Well,
We got far away from Golden Age comics.
I don't defend anything that happened within the situation that Ed found himself in on any part. I didn't really know Ed. We knew each other in passing because we were both Pittsburgh guys. We both would table at the Three Rivers Comic Con. He knows you. I knew you. I know you. That was our common bond. My sister, I bought her the Hip Hop Family Tree books because she loves anything about the history of hip hop. So that was our in, like I never got to experience Ed further than that, whether it be like in a social setting outside of a convention, I should say. Um, I never really listened to cartoon kayfabe. I listened to one or two episodes, or watched them, I should say, and I didn't really get a sense. I mean, like the dynamic between him and Jim is based on the dynamic between announcers in a wrestling television show. One is the face announcer, one is the heel announcer. Jimmy was the face, Eddie was the heel. So Ed would purposely, kind of push that narrative a little bit, to kind of make it so that he could be not controversial, but kind of egg the play the devil's advocate, I guess.
Right, absolutely.
So I knew that dynamic, so I didn't hold that against him. Now, that all said, I don't defend any action that makes any woman feel uncomfortable. I don't think either of us do. I don't, I also don't know Ed's intent. You can say a couple of words, and Ed, when he was apologizing or when he, put up his ostensibly a suicide note, um, Ed was, basically explaining that, I didn't mean it this way. I was, playing a character or saying words like to kind of be controversial or whatever, like he thought that he could be Ed and joke with somebody that really he couldn't, you know so it became what's real and what's not. The other thing, though, as fast as it was, the and it was like whiplash. The thing that I think we need to all remember, though, is how long it took for, say, I mentioned Harvey Weinstein already, how long it took for Harvey Weinstein to get his comeuppance in all of the cases that he was involved in. So you think about how many years, decades, even that took place until he finally justice was done. We got to a point, maybe we still are at a point where things like this, there's zero tolerance for, and it happens that fast because the tolerance is so low for um, alibis, uh, apologies, and all that. I think the thing that bothers me the most about Ed and his situation was that note was super sincere, and it killed me because it's like that's his apology, like, and it felt like nobody would accept his apology unless he was gone, and that's the tragedy of the whole thing.
There's a lot of tragedy because like it had. I remember reading it, and as I'm reading it in real time at that time that
Mm.
day, which was April 1st, right? I think it was April
Yeah.
Fool's Day. It had such clarity too, like emotional clarity. Like he
Mm.
understood what he was conveying.
Right.
And remember, I spoke to him, and I'm not going to get into the details of some of the things he said, but and I'm not going to say what I understand or don't understand of the quote allegation, which is someone kind of basically saying, "Oh, I got a little groomed by someone she never met."
Right.
They never met. This is internet time,
Yeah. Yeah.
okay? Which I respect is also impactful because look at us, right? We're using the internet right now in order to converse, and I understand the power of it. And I don't know this person or the other person that also kind of came out, just to hop on. I asked him, why was this person doing this now? And he gave me an answer that he thought.
Mhm.
And it was just still like at the end of the day, it was, and I've spoke to my girlfriend about it, spoke to studio mates, Heidi McDonald even, and it was kind of a nothing burger in some ways, not to whatever judge, but I felt like there was a perfect storm of him losing his book deal, of him losing his gallery show, and also a lot of his friends and peers kind of backlashed against him immediately
Mhm.
without even asking him. So I
Right.
think he was like, thank God somebody's calling me. I'm sure other people called him, but
Mhm.
maybe not a lot of people called him. And I was one of the people to call him to be like, not to judge him and be like, I heard you're a bad person online.
Right.
It was more like, hey, you okay? And what's up? Like, do you want to talk to me or not or whatever? I'm here. I'm lending an ear, kind of a thing.
Yeah.
And I think it was that. But ultimately, and this is where bringing it back and making it not about Ed, even though he's the launching pad to this, which is, um, I feel like he surrendered his identity his persona to the internet in some ways.
Yeah.
Okay. He became a star on the internet, you know? And like that's not you can't do that. You
Mhm.
just like look what it could do, you know,
Yeah.
because then the internet can bite back. And if you're not prepared and you know whatever he was going through in his brain and like which I can't answer, um it ultimately, you know, I mean this is going to be controversial to say, but I do feel it was kind of like a murder suicide what happened, you know. And a lot of people said, Dean, don't say that. That's bad. And I even removed that from what I wrote on published on the Beat today. My original last sentence was something about how I feel like it was a murder suicide, because it killed him. Somehow it killed him, even though he killed himself. I don't know. I'm still struggling with this, and it angers me, um, because that he should not be dead. Number one, you know.
I agree. I agree with that 100%. There, the like, I think just another day, had he waited another day, had he picked up the phone, just one other person. I don't know who that
Yeah,
person is. Might have been you, might have been somebody else. But had he picked up that phone just from one other person, I think he'd still be here. I think it would have made sense to him after that. Like, all right, okay, it's not the end of the world losing this book deal. I can somehow support my family a different way. I don't know. I just
I
feel
will
like
say this. I will say this. I'm angry, and I would say this to the people I know at the book publisher, which name I won't say right now,
mhm,
that based on an allegation you're pulling a book. Why don't you find
right,
out what the hell's going on? That's called an allegation. It wasn't a guilty verdict.
right,
No one had gone to jail. Nothing had really happened. And you're pulling a book deal and the
yeah.
gallery and then the sorry, I forgot to mention this. The local news station that, as he put it, shanghaied his father
I,
and
I,
tried to
I,
talk to like what? And showing his address and all this stuff?
yeah,
No.
that's here in Pittsburgh. I remember I was here at home. I think I'd just gotten home from work, or it might have been a day off. I can't remember, but I know the news was on, and I happened to catch it now, and it's a local cartoonist. It's like, wait a minute, and then I looked, and I was like, oh my God, that's Ed.
Right.
Like, or like they're talking about Ed, not that he was
Right.
on the TV. But yeah, I mean, I was witness to that. Like not like outside my window, but like the local news was right there. Like
Yep. Yep.
it's
Yep.
surreal. Like it's very surreal.
Well, all right. So I wanted to, I don't know if you had, I know we wanted to talk about a comic book. We'll talk about
Yes.
that either ASAP or shortly. I did have a question,
Okay.
but maybe let's have fun with the comic book first. But my question is, did you have a question as well?
No,
Okay.
my question is kind of in relation to the comic, actually.
Okay, great. Let's do the comic then
Is
for right
is
now.
his name Ram V or Ram 5? Because I'm pretty sure it's Ram V, but I would totally love it if it was Ram 5.
That would
Like
be
I'm pretty
awesome.
sure, like based on like some things I know about the actual writer, that it's like short V is short for like a longer um
Sure. Sure.
I think Indian name.
Right.
But
Right.
like let's say Asian, just to be on the safe side. But like I would love it if it was Ram 5.
Yeah, Ram 5 would be pretty dope. I
Oh,
think it's Ram V. In fact, I met him when I published volume one of the Red Hook at Image Comics, and they
okay.
invited me to be part of like an Image Comic Con that they used to do, you know, where they would
I remember
have,
that. Yeah.
yeah, that was fun. So I met him then when I guess he was kind of a new emerging writer, and he was really cool. So I don't know if you wanted to get a quick reaction from me first, and then we'll get into the comic. So the comic we're talking about is New Gods #1, right?
Yeah,
Which is
and I think it's the most perfect comic we could talk about, especially because as you said, your influence is Jack Kirby, Alex Toth, Upper West Side. Like it's very much ingrained in you. New Gods you worked for Walt Simonson.
yep.
Um,
Well, I was
like
going to
it's
mention. So speaking of, okay, so we're talking about New Gods #1, which was written by Ram V, Ram 5, uh, drawn by a guy I've never seen before
Evan
named
Cagle.
Evan Cagle,
Yeah.
and Jorge Fornes draws like the beginning sequence, right,
Mhm.
of this comic. And I was thinking about that after I read the comic. I was like, why did he just draw the beginning part and then it enters this new phase? And it's because, oh, that's why.
Yeah.
Because it's almost like the old New Gods is handing the baton to the new gods, as
Right.
it were, right? In a way. And so, God, I don't even know how to explain new gods to people who don't know new gods. In fact, I don't think I've ever read all the new gods myself. Okay.
I don't think
But
we'd ever
the
have
new,
time for that.
no, I mean, and I my our artist friend of ours, Dave Proch, finally just read all the omnibus. He said it's amazing, you know.
Mhm.
So, and there's a lot of comics to read, but and it was never finished either, you know.
Yeah.
And I think it even didn't even do well when Jack Kirby first published it. And now years later, Jack Kirby gave DC its greatest villain in Darkseid, you know,
Mhm.
and a lot of other characters. And so part of what this first issue by the new talent that are now the custodians of New Gods reminded me of is I think it was issue 4 or 5 of New Gods called The Pact. Do you know what that story, The
Mhm.
Pact?
Yeah.
So basically, there's a High Father. There are two planets that are right next to each other, which is impossible because they would just explode. But whatever, two planets next to each other. One is Apocalypse, which sounds like what it is. It's a very messed up planet. Like it's almost like California right now, you know, like
Mhm.
but a
Yeah.
planet of that, right? And then what's the other planet called with the High Father?
Genesis.
A New Genesis. And there's a High Father, and he looks like a white bearded god with holding a lance or whatever, and
Shepherd staff, I
right.
think.
And then you got Darkseid, who's like dark and like looks craggly and messed up. And at some point, they made a pact. Those two dudes, they both had a son, and they traded their sons. One was Orion, which is Darkseid's son,
Mhm.
and Mr. Miracle, whose name is Norrin. No,
No,
that's
scot free.
Scott Free. I was thinking Silver Surfer all of a sudden.
Mhm.
Um, and to make a pact so that they're not necessarily at eternal war although they are at eternal war, is that they trade sons
Mhm.
early on, babies. And so Scott Free was raised by this evil woman who trained him to be, a badass kind of escape artist in some ways. And then Orion, who's their is a great warrior who actually hides his ugly face with a handsome face type
With the
thing
mother box.
with a mother box. And a mother box basically is your cell phone, everybody. Anyway, but it can do other things that are cool.
Yes.
So anyway, that was a very important issue and storyline in the setup of New Gods, right?
Mhm.
So when I read this first issue by Ram V and these artists, where Jorge Fornes is basically passing the baton from like classic New Gods kind of comics to the new guy, you
Mhm.
know, um, it's about a kid. It's
Yeah.
about another
It comes back
pact.
down to a kid. Yeah.
It comes back down to a kid. Now, before we get into nuts and bolts in that, I did want to make a stylistic response, which was as I was reading this comic and looking at Evan Cagle's art, it reminded me, his art, of the spirit of Walter Simonson and Archie Goodwin's Manhunter,
I could see that,
being
especially
really
in Orion.
creative, and Orion, the art style,
Yeah.
but also the interesting angles of all the panels. Like he just did different things,
Mhm.
when you look at it, it was pretty unique and like exciting and felt very almost indie and raw in some ways,
Yeah, in
in a
some
DC
ways.
comic,
Totally.
you know, and the coloring's great. And it kind of reminded me, and of course, not when I'm talking Simonson doing Manhunter, of course, Walter Simonson famously then went on to write and draw Thor, and he currently does a comics what do you call it? His own series, creator own series
Ragnarok.
called Ragnarok, which is basically a Thor comic of sorts. Um, and so it kind of all comes around in that way. But story wise, it was a pretty easy, simple setup where you're kind of meeting some of the new gods. And even if you've never read a new god comic, these are interesting characters to look at, to find out more about, right? And then we come upon a couple, Barda and Scott Free, aka Mr. Miracle, and their child that they've had, right? Which I think happened in the Tom King Mitch Gerard series, Mr. Miracle
Yeah,
12
I'm
Issues
pretty
Later.
sure she was at least pregnant in that.
Right. And so they have a baby, but then I was a little confused for a minute, and you can help me out here.
Mhm.
Basically, the High Father has told Orion, his son, that you have to go kill this new god baby. And I forget why. Did they say why, or he just orders him?
They didn't. He just ordered.
He orders it. So we don't know why either, the reader. Okay. So he goes down and he says to Scott Free, I don't want to kill this kid, but dad told me to do it. I have to do what he
Yeah.
says. So I'm giving you 7 days to find this kid and protect that kid from me killing him because I have to kill it.
Right.
Now, the only thing that confused me for a minute and helped me out here is I thought that Scott Free's kid was the kid,
Did too. I did too.
but it's
That was a
not.
nice little twist
There's a
that
little twist because you do see like a heads up that there is this other baby that has been born or something that we don't know who this is. They're like the
right.
last new god or something, right?
I think it was the first new god born on Earth.
That's what it is. Well, oh, I guess so. Scott Free and Barda's kid were not born on Earth. They're probably born on a new Genesis or something. But I thought it was Earth. I can't remember the setting of Tom King's and Mr. Gerard's Mr. Miracle story. But
I mean,
anyway,
that was
the point is, it's not their kid. It is this other kid that we have not really met yet, right?
right.
And we don't even know who the parents are, right?
I don't think so. I think they got killed.
Or maybe they got killed, and there's this new baby that's been born. So
Mhm.
it's an interesting setup. And also, I love that Ram V was like, okay, Vito, someone, if DC came to you and said, okay, write another New Gods comic, and or me, I would have no idea what to do. Like, I can't even think off the top of my dome right now, like what I
Yeah,
would
yeah.
do. I know Mike Allred and what his brother, they did like a miniseries featuring Bug. Was that the name of the
Yes,
character?
yes.
Uh,
Forager, but I
Forager.
think they call him Bug.
Or something like that. But so they did a New Gods comic, but they just took a character, or like I was saying, Tom King and Mitch Gerards did Mr. Miracle, and there were adjacent New Gods characters within it, including
Mhm, mhm.
Darkseid. But to actually tackle New Gods again, which is like asking a lot, is rough, So I thought that what a great way to kind of you know, pay homage to the people who are fans of Jack Kirby's New Gods.
Yeah.
And anything that's been done since, I believe New Gods continued after Jack Kirby with, was it Steve Englehart or, oh
Well,
God,
I
who
can't
was
remember
the
who did
writer?
Hunger Dogs.
Well, Hunger Dogs was Jack Kirby and like 30 people putting band-aids all over it. Like
Right.
a ton of hands were on that, which wasn't very good. And then John Byrne did New Gods for a while, and then actually getting back to Walt Simonson, he did an incredible Orion
Orion.
series,
Yeah.
which was a New Gods comic that actually revealed that what do you call it? Scott Free is the anti-life equation
Yes.
or something like that.
Mhm.
So anyway, that's me. Sorry to talk a lot about a
No,
22
no, you're
page
good.
comic, but where do you sit with it? How do you feel?
With this comic, when I was reading it, I was like, all right, this is pretty good. And then I read, and then I kept reading, and I was like, wait a minute, this was an idea that I had for my own comics. And then I was like, all right, let's see what the nuances are. And the nuances are there. Like if I do it and you read this book, now and you read my thing later, you can see where they're similar, but you'll see where we both diverge. And it's really like I got goosebumps just now, actually. It's really interesting. It's kind of this great exercise. And I would love to meet Ram and like really talk about stuff like
Yeah,
this with him at some point. But it's this really great exercise where you go, okay, Dean and Vito, we're going to give you the basic plot of Inglorious Bastards, let's say. What do you guys, it's the Nazis, it's this, it's the Jewish girl, etc. And you take all these little sparse elements. How do you guys put it together? And we would both do it differently. And even if we were working together on it, I think we would still do it differently than we would separate. So
right.
I love uh, seeing that, because we all know that there's very few new ideas, and we're all coming from the same monomyth, Joseph Campbell, world, and we all end up telling the same stories. It's just how, going back to what we said at the beginning, how we put ourselves into it that makes it differently. Now, I can't I'm going to apologize again. I don't know Ram's heritage, but something about like I feel like it's like he's from like India or his family's from India, and like the character, the kid that's born that with the new god is from India, and so like it's like he's putting himself into it, and it's like
Sure.
in a very kind of meta sense, he's being put into the role of creating a new gods.
Hmm.
And that's what that kid is, the
Hmm.
new god. So the internet's like, oh man, you can't do new gods, you know. So they're Orion coming to kill him. And we, like you and me, who enjoy it, are like, no, we're Mr. Miracle. We're going to save this guy.
Right.
And I think, you know, he nailed something there. And I don't know what it is. I won't know until the series gets a little bit further on. But the metatextual thing that's in there, or at least what I'm reading into it, I think is just so fascinating and so much fun. And then like you take the dichotomy of Orion and Mr. Miracle now taking the place of their fathers.
Right.
Respect, like Orion was raised on New Genesis, but he's becoming a killer for New Genesis. Scott, Mr. Miracle, has to be the protector, and he
Yep.
was born, not born, but he was raised on the desperate world.
Right.
So it's like, oh, look at how like, and that's, I mean, that's storytelling, guys. Like that is the purest form of storytelling, is just taking everything that came before and just going, all right, let's just turn it this way,
Right.
and
Right.
it's beautiful to me. Like, and the art's fantastic to me.
Right.
I think like his Orion, like when Orion shows his monstrous face, it looks just like Dark Side, and I'm like, that's it. Like
Yeah.
that's exactly what it's supposed to look like. I think it's
Yeah.
fantastic. I think
No,
it's a
it,
fun
it was
issue.
it was one issue. It was light but loaded, right?
Yes,
And
yes,
and and also, all right. So this is an interesting question. Jack Kirby's Jewish,
yeah.
doing new gods. Whenever I see the word God, because I'm not religious, I do wonder: is there some religion in it? Is there some kind of is there religion in this? And I know you are of Christian faith, right?
Yeah.
So do you read any kind of
No,
faith into the comic?
I mean, there are. It's like whenever Bryan Singer took on Superman in Superman Returns, he really played up on the messianic tones of Superman, the imagery of him kind of floating down like almost like Jesus, and he was really heavy-handed with it. And while I didn't not enjoy it, it wasn't something that I was like, oh, thank God somebody's talking, for Christians or
Right.
whatever. I always find that Christianity is best left to atheists to
Mm,
describe, because they can at least get to the pure side of it and say, if heaven exists, being good gets you into heaven. It doesn't matter if you necessarily believe in God as long as you act godly. Do you know what
right.
I mean? So whenever I see new gods, I don't like, or just the title, I don't get a like a sacrilegious anything from it, because it's mythology, and all of it is mythology. If like Ron Hill very famously said, if the Bible is a holy book, then so is Superman.
Hmm.
Like it, because not because my faith says that this is fictional, but because my faith says that the words of good men are words that good men will follow.
Hmm.
And that's
Hmm.
and that's all there is to it. Like I don't think you need to have like this crisis of faith reading something that, Thor, for example, God of Thunder. And I don't think you need to go, well, no, there's only one God of no, it's stories, man. Let's just sit down and relax and read some stories.
So you were talking before about like when we have kind of collaborated because like I drew your first published DC comic, a Batman story,
My first published comic, period. Yeah.
right? And it was Batman Adventures, I believe, right?
Mhm.
And it's Bruce Wayne goes to therapy, and it was great. It's
Yes.
a great, perfect story. Five
Thank you.
pages, six, something like that.
Yeah.
And then years later, we've done a couple things, but years later, when I was pitching the Red Hook, that then expanded into like a new Brooklyn series of three
Mhm.
comics. One was the Red Hook, one was the Brooklynite with Seth Kushner, and then the Purple Heart, which you wrote with why is his name blanking?
Ricardo Venancio.
Renancio, great, great artist. And I remember, we're sitting in our studio together and trying to like hammer out, well, what is the Purple Heart? Could be like the name of it. And I think there had been other maybe iterations before the one that became the new Brooklyn one, right?
Yeah, we were when we first came up with the Purple Heart, it was you, Seth, and I. We
Right.
went to lunch at Subway. I'll never forget. We went to lunch at Subway around the corner from, I forget where the studio was, but it was above a bookstore. And we
Oh,
went
that
to,
was yeah, on Core Street. Yeah,
yes. So
yeah,
we went to Subway around the corner and we were talking about Jim Thompson and like the idea of like a revenge fantasy Vietnam vet coming back from a war to find that his population, what's the Jim Thompson book, Population
oh, Pop
1000?
1280, Pop
Pop 1280.
1280.
And like we were talking about that specifically and about how this character, the Purple Heart, would be like kind of like one of Jim Thompson's characters. Cut to the white flags being on the Brooklyn Bridge, and that's when you and I kind of like,
Yeah,
started. And Seth was sick at the time, but we were, talking on the phone with him and going back and forth, and
right,
trying to parse what is this, what does this mean, and what could this mean, and how do we make a comic out of it?
right, right. But then what happened was like, so I had my Red Hook character, but I hadn't really incorporated Brooklyn into it until the origin really is that uh, the American flags were replaced by white flags on the Brooklyn Bridge for about a week long. Later on, you find out that it was a prank pulled by some German artists.
Yes.
But during that week, I was thinking, well, what's a white flag? That's when you give up,
Mhm.
right? And I constantly am struggling with being living in New York as an artist, right? To the point where what we do is we struggle and it's hard. Nobody put a gun to my head to be an artist, but I'm an artist, and it's not easy. And as we are, and so I kind of jokingly thought, oh well, Brooklyn gave up, and why did it give up? Because it's heartbroken by the toxicity and the indifference of the world, right? To the point where it doesn't want to to do anything anymore. But in giving up, then the comic book idea started coming in,
Right.
where I was like, oh, Brooklyn should secede, literally and physically from New York, ergo America.
A
And then
retreat.
started coming up with the ideas, oh, so where art can be bartered for food and services. I was getting all hippy dippy and stuff, right?
Well,
And then
more
that,
than that, I think you were being idealistic. Like, what
yeah,
would the currency be for you personally? You know what I mean?
right,
Like,
right, right,
if you had no access to Manhattan, for
right,
Dean Haspiel living in Brooklyn in Carroll Gardens, what would be how would I make money? How would I eat?
right,
And I think that's
right.
where you maybe subconsciously came at it.
And I remember having a root canal and I couldn't afford it, but luckily the dentist loved my art and was like
Yeah,
commissioned me, and I made art for a root canal, so
yeah.
like that was another thing that was proof in the pudding, right? But so I'm doing my Red Hook character. I won't get into that right now, but in talking about us and our collaboration, like I basically we were like, well, how can we incorporate? We went from like a war hero, Purple Heart, a Purple Heart like
The metal.
award or pendant or whatever from
Mhm.
the war, to being basically Brooklyn's Silver Surfer,
Yeah,
and basically protector of the heart of Brooklyn, because Brooklyn is sentient. Brooklyn is alive, And so I just said, I mean, we sat in the same room,
Mhm.
but you took it away. You took that idea and you ran with it. And we were talking about like, well, what would have happened? Because one of the things I avoided in the Red Hook was I have the secession and separation happen, but then I jump a year. I didn't
Mhm.
deal with what it's like, kind of like what's going to happen with California. What is going to happen in the next year in California?
Right.
With all these burnt, towns and people's lives uprooted and everything else. It's messed up. So I didn't want to try to deal with the nuts and bolts of that. So I kind of go jump a year, but you kind of dealt with, I don't remember, it was a year later as well, but what you dealt with was government and like gangs and
Yeah.
like who is the Purple Heart and what's his function and what can he do, you know?
Yeah. I dealt with the actual disaster, and then the year still went by. But the what happens is, and again, I have to credit Ricardo for being able to interpret what I was thinking. And the heart of Brooklyn says to Isaiah, you have to be unmade. And there's this great sequence where color gets flat, and then like the inks come out, and then like it's just pencils, and then he's nothing. And
Right,
like
right.
that's what's happening. It's almost The way I looked at it was the first Christopher Reeve Superman. I've always like I never understood the part where Clark Kent finds the Arctic Circle and throws the crystal, and then the Fortress of Solitude comes up, and then he's in the fortress learning for a couple of years. I think it might be 5 years. And then when he finally leaves, he's Superman, and he's a more fully formed person. I don't know where he got his college degree in journalism from, but I mean, in terms of the movie, but
Right,
he leaves. He flies off, famously from the fortress into Metropolis, where he literally drops down and gets hit by a cab.
right.
And so like I looked at that, him being Purple Heart being unmade as that kind of Fortress of Solitude moment. And then when he shows up, there's a guy who's literally stealing the color out of everything. And
Yeah.
so he has to stop. And I mean, you can read it. It's for
No, no, I
free
know. I mean,
on
you're
Webtoon.
just
But like,
talking
I mean,
about,
to the
no, I mean,
viewer,
you're
you
talking
can,
about creativity. This
yeah.
is where ideas come from and how you turn them into something and tell a rich story, not
Mhm.
just ABC, but all the nuances. You talked about nuances in the New Gods, the New
Mhm.
Gods comic. And then you said you kind of had an idea as well.
Yeah.
Have you ever written this idea or fleshed it out, or what is
It
this
has
idea
the
that's similar?
spark of it is in for any back issue hunters. It is going to be in Stray Volume 2, Issue 4. No, Issue 5. It's the penultimate issue. There's a like it's already been printed, so I can say this and not feel like I'm like ripping off anybody or they're ripping me off. It doesn't matter. There's a race of godlike beings called Titanodae, and they are from a different planet, and they are basically their origin will be revealed at some point. But there's a big deal that there was one that was formed on Earth, and it's literally in the Stray comic. But the thing is, like I said, it's nobody's trying to kill him. Nobody, like it totally diverges there. Just the idea of a god being born on Earth, which is, you know, in my universes, I've always looked at it as the nine realms uh of Norse mythology. So Asgard would be an Earth that's full of heroes. Midgard would be an Earth that's very real to what we are living in. So like World War Mob, my book that uh, hopefully we'll be putting out this year through Zion Studios as a full collection. World War Mob is a real story, so it takes place on the Midgard version of my universe. So I always look at my universe in terms of those nine realms. So the idea that there's a superhero, it isn't that foreign in this world, but the idea of a god as a superhero is a little bit different. So you take that and you go, well, what if we made a god on Earth? And that's where it becomes like this kind of breeding ground for ideas. Like you start thinking, all right, well, what are the implications of that religiously? What are the implications of that politically? What are the implications of that personally? And you take all those different aspects, and that's how you get your story. And going back to Ram and New Gods, the story is being told by the two sons, and their point of view, and to a lesser extent Metron, but like their points of view are crucial to understanding how their world, where they are gods, like their world, like how it works. And Scott, living in America on Earth, is the most human of all of them. So you get a chance to be like he gets the chance to be the audience, uh, like the character that the audience identifies with, so again, not something I would have done, but very close, but not close enough to feel like I was ripped off or he's gonna beat me to the punch or anything like that.
Right. And also, I think like ideas always come in twos and threes. Like
Mhm.
for
Yeah,
some
yeah.
reason, there's something in the air and the water. So my question to you then, and maybe we'll
Mhm.
wrap it up here. I
Okay.
had a different question I can save for next time. Is Superman a god?
That would, my answer is no, because it would be predicated on the fact that Krypton would be heaven. And if that were the case, heaven is destroyed. So there's no afterlife. There's no like, there's nothing to achieve. There's nothing to strive for. And that's the thing that makes Superman great is that he is the pinnacle of what not human achievement, but what achievement can be. Like we can't be Superman, but we can be Superman. You
Okay,
know what I
but
mean?
actually, you just touched upon something I never would have thought of because I'm not religious or whatever.
Mhm.
That if Superman were a god and Krypton was heaven and heaven is gone, and then if you're trying to attain some kind of
Life or
after
whatever.
death space to go to, let's call it, right? And then if you believe that Superman was God, but if you also believe that heaven was now gone, maybe the lesson is to be the best person you could be while on Earth,
That might be it too. So maybe he is. I know that
right?
a lot of guys. I don't think I, I say this, and I think you already know this. Like last week, you mentioned, telling people that you appreciate how much you appreciate them. Um, like you or last week, a couple weeks ago, whatever it was. But you had mentioned something to that effect, and I remember when Len Wein passed away. It was maybe 5 years ago at this point. I can't remember exactly, but the moment I read that, I emailed Mark Wade and I said, I want you to know that I appreciate you. I value your friendship. And, I've always looked at you as a mentor type, if not like older, uncle type of, like person looking out for me. And I appreciate you. And I want you to say that. And he thanked me and everything. And obviously, because Mark is a very Midwestern nice guy, like he is the hype. Do you know what I mean? And
Mark is great.
yeah, and like I think about, like Mark, how he would approach Superman. And I don't think any of this would be it. You know what I mean? Like I don't think
Right.
he cares if Superman's a god or not. I don't think he I don't think he cares about it, but I think he recognizes what that responsibility is. And I think he puts that forward more so. But what you said about like there's no heaven, but here's God, let's just be good. Like this is, what we're going to try to achieve. We're going to try to achieve superhumanity, or something. I think that's
Or
totally Mark Wade.
super
Yeah.
empathy. Like heaven is on Earth. Heaven is Earth.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like that
And
could
I, and I,
be a way to look at it.
and I don't know if you caught me saying it, but I think that's a Mark Wade Superman right there.
Totally.
You know what I mean? And that like that kind of gets me excited. What's funny, I know we're long now, it's fine. Um we don't know how long these things are going to be anyway.
Right. Right.
It just goes. Um but in a couple of years Superman, at least the first appearance of Superman goes into the public domain. And I think it's in what is it, 2020, I think, something like that, or 2034, one of the two. And so, not necessarily in preparation, but like I always like doing these exercises writing wise or character creation wise. Like, what is my Superman? And I started, really thinking about it, and I put together this guy that just for the time being, I'm calling him Paradigm. That's not what I'm going to call him probably, but like it just, what is and like what is the idea that I had, and I'm probably still going to do it, and I don't care. Like I said, an idea is an idea, and we all have the same ones.
Yep.
But the idea is that this Superman looking character falls to Earth, and it's the first time Earth has ever seen a Superman. And he's been on Earth, but he's never been to this Earth. So it's like, all right, Superman falls to a separate Earth where they've never seen a Superman. How do they react? Uh, what are the reactions of the government, et cetera, et cetera. And the thing is, the thing nobody's asking, what the hell sent him crashing to Earth?
Mm,
So that's the story, so I've been working kind of slowly, kind of like in my spare time, almost a novel at this point, just writing, prose here and there, just like, just little things. Like the first thing I wrote was the newspaper reporter that no, not it was the newspaper the day before this happened. So
Mm.
the person that like is one of the main characters, like they get up, they have their routine, they go get the paper, and they're like, I forget the newspaper headline every day, but I remember this day because of what happened the next day.
Mm-hmm.
And it's
Mm.
almost like somebody remembering September 10th, 2001, that headline.
I
You
was
know what
just
I
gonna
mean?
say, so you remember Tim Hall, my writer
Yeah,
friend?
yeah.
So he had written this gigantic headline, front page article, I think about Muscle Shoals or something like that. And it was published, it came out in the boxes of New York Press, I believe. I think on 9/11.
Wow.
Nobody ever read it. Nobody ever saw it. Nobody,
Oh,
or the 10th. Something like
yeah.
before people got to it, and then it was completely ignored because everything was ignored, for
Right,
a while.
right.
And it was like his big deal, and it just nobody ever saw it. I mean, talk about all the things that came out on 9/11 that nobody, you
Yeah,
know,
yeah.
they were waiting at like a year for that date, that drop date, and then that was like the worst day.
Man, imagine. But yeah, like so that's like I like every now and again I'll post on Facebook like what is Superman to you?
Yeah,
Just that question. And like or I know a couple of years ago I go, why is Darkseid evil? Like, what makes him the ultimate evil? And you get like most of my friends on Facebook are comic adjacent anyway. So they just, will go through like this is, and they'll show like a clip from the Justice League cartoon, or they'll, put a link to this, being, the ultimate Superman, or whatever. And the thing is, like, I don't ask that because I'm trying to get ideas from people. What I'm asking them for is so I can kind of force myself to think what my answer is. Like,
yep.
I don't, as crazy it is, I don't think about Superman often. Um, but when I do, I think about Superman intensely because I don't think about the character. I think about what the character represents and what it means to people,
Hmm.
if that
Hmm.
makes any kind of sense at all.
Absolutely. I mean, he's the hardest character to write, I think,
I did
to
it
be honest.
once.
No,
I did it
I know you
once,
did.
but it wasn't what I wanted to write, funny enough. Here's something that I tell Dean all the time. Anytime I come up with a story, whether it be comic book, a novel that I need a cover for, or whatever. Dean is the first artist I think of, bar none, because Dean drew my first story. So when I pitched Superman to DC, the story I pitched initially was how does Superman know how to fight? And it was a story about who trained Superman, and it doesn't matter. It's Hawkman, so I'll just tell you. But the person that was supposed to draw it was Dean. And then what happened was it was just about to get um, approved, I believe. I think I got notes on it. And then as I was getting ready to take those notes, I got called by my editor, Mike Siglane at the time, who's now at Disney and kicking all kinds of ass. Mike goes, I need a favor. I need a one and done Superman story because we're trying to sign an artist. And Marvel's ready to offer him something, and we need to give him something Friday. And this was on Wednesday. So I was like, I got a one issue story. I'll just, I can't say that I hacked it out because it was a hard thing to try to figure out. And but the thing is, what people don't realize is, like Dean was saying, it was a 6 issue story for Batman, right? From there, it was all 8 pagers, 3 pagers, and Scooby Doo. So I was used to writing things compact. So a one issue story wasn't hard. It was just, what's the story you tell with Superman? And that's how DC signed an exclusive contract with Julian Lopez, because he was the guy that ended up drawing my Superman story. And that's the story that came out. And the story that I was going to do with Dean ended up going into a drawer somewhere. So
Yeah.
there you go.
Yeah. Ay, ay, ay. Well, I mean, we all have a bunch of stories. In fact, um, I'm going to be sharing a script soon
Yes.
for paid subscribers, and I'm going to be doing more of that throughout the year, more behind the scenes thing. You and I probably have, or you and I, a lot of creators have those pitches that never sold.
Mhm.
that are valid ideas, you know,
Yeah.
that are still interesting or could be sold. But you know, I feel like, you know, I think it's okay to share some of them and get some feedback in that way. You know, you never know what somebody might you know can add in a response that would help. You know, I was talking to a friend of mine about directors, and you know, sometimes you think a director is someone who has to have all the ideas themselves, and it only comes purely from them. But the best directors are the one that, like, if the craft services guy says, "Hey guys, I kind of was noticing one thing that maybe you forgot," and they give a little idea, and a good director knows when to use a good idea.
I
That's
think a
how they're
good,
a good director.
yeah, I
You
think
know,
that goes for everybody. Good creators, good
that's
editors,
true.
good, like it's, like, I'm ostensibly, I think I am, like, in all actuality, the editor in chief of Zion Studios, Blind Squirrel Studios as well. And I'll get sent, for example, currently on Kickstarter. I'm not sure exactly when this episode comes out, but currently, as of January 9th, Charlie McKelvey's running the American Yakuza
Right.
issue 3 Kickstarter. And I remember, I was given the script, and, I gave a bunch of notes on it. And, like, you always, like, because we're doing this remotely, you never know exactly how a person's going to take your
Right.
editorial direction or editorial notes. But I think everybody can recognize a good idea, just like you were saying. Like, a good idea can come from anywhere. You
Yep.
can't be close to it. You just have to, be able to recognize that it's a good idea, and maybe even a better idea than your first initial good idea.
Yeah, sure. Why not? Ego removed. I mean, I want to show you for the people who are watching the video. Here's a copy of
Hey.
my chest face comic that I'm pretty excited about. And I remember sending you and Charlie the script for
Mhm.
this, and you had like a funny reaction. You were like, I don't know, it was something like, just because I wanted your react. I wanted, maybe you might have a note or something, you know, or
Mhm.
whatever. And you wrote something like, Dean, I don't know how you do what you do, but just keep doing it, or something like that.
Y-
Like,
You know, the, I think anybody that reads your work should be able to recognize this in your work. But as much as the artist Jack Kirby meets Alex Toth with splashes of Walt and Howard and, a bunch of different influences, it's the words that I tend to like gravitate to. Not because, the art's not pretty or the art's not for me. Again, you're the first guy I think of. But when I read it, there's like a certain beat poet pentameter to it. Very Jack Kerouac, very uh, William Burroughs in a way. Like, they're not William Burroughs in the cut up side section side of things, but just like there's like this kind of cool, like an automatic cool to it, and it can only be Miles Davis, 1950s kind of, like, like that kind of patter, and like, you somehow, I don't know how you do it. You somehow throw in like such blatant comic book language into your dialogue, like, and it doesn't come across as corny. It comes across as Dean. Like, you'll say something like, will somebody say, "Can you dig it?" And you're like, "I know you could," or like, "No, my brother, you got to get your own." And it's like, out of anybody else, that would be so damn corny or so out of place. But Dean, like,
right,
it's just you. You know what I mean? And
right,
so, like,
right,
you can totally figure out where your stories are going, because there's that traditional element of it, but also the fun of it is seeing how they get to it, and
right,
so
right.
I was so happy to read that ahead of
Oh, well,
time.
I appreciate it. I can't wait
I
to
can't
send you
wait
the
to read
comic.
get the book.
I can't wait. And it's funny because now that you're kind of like commenting on my writing style, I think what I like about your writing style, and it's going to sound weird, but do you know Me TV?
Yes, yes.
Where it's
Like
basically
the old stuff. Yeah.
the
Yeah.
old stuff, right? But in a way, it could be. Yes, it's dated, but it's also evergreen, right?
Yeah.
Your story writing style reminds me of Me TV in a way, in that it's evergreen
Oh
and it's
man.
classic, but it's also 2024, 2025. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like when you write it today, it's modern evergreen in a way,
Thanks,
like,
man. I appreciate that.
and I think that that's where, in a way, it feels like nostalgia and comfort, but it's also, and I know it's being done with a good heart too.
Mhm. Thank you.
Like it conveys that kind of feeling. So anyway, there you go, mutual admirations stuff going on
It's
here.
fine. I don't think anybody's ever to my face described my writing to me. Do you know what I mean? Like
Right.
it's a very foreign like thing to hear what someone thinks of you. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
Um, like you've complimented me as a creator before. You've complimented me like earlier in this episode, talking about Purple Heart, like that I took
Yep.
something and ran with it and stuff. That in and of itself is a compliment, but I've never heard my writing style described in any way. So that was different, man. I've never heard that. Like I totally like it totally makes sense. It totally is correct. Like it's not nothing I can fight, because it's true.
Right.
And
Right.
like it totally just like I like that. Like I will be the me TV of comics. It's fine.
Hell yeah, man.
Yeah.
I think it's a high compliment, to be
I
honest.
do
So
too. Absolutely.
all right. Well, I'm going to save this question because it's a broad question, so it's not
Okay.
anything specific, and we can save it for the next round.
Yeah.
And I guess we don't have a sign off or anything. Although I was thinking, if you did the thing that we used to say in the old studio when I would walk in
Yay,
the
yay.
door.
Uh, Thank you everybody for watching. We will see you
Thank
next time.
you.